This is part 2 of your day 1 notes. What we're actually going to do now is solve a perfect square binomial. So in the last video, we learned how to complete the square, and now we're actually going to solve it. So we are going to start by working backwards. So what we have is a perfect square binomial, and it's equal to a value. What we're going to do is figure out or remember how to get rid of this exponent of 2. And if you remember, its inverse operation would be to square root it. And that means it would cancel out the 2. So you'd be left with x plus 5 is equal to 10. But it's not just 10. Because if you remember, anytime you take the square root of a number, it would be 10 or negative 10. Because if you say we square root this, you have 2 possible answers. So we're going to say x plus 5 equals 10 or x plus 5 equals negative 10. Okay, you always have to have 2 answers when solving. So now all we're going to do is solve by subtracting 5. So you're going to have x equals 5, or we're going to subtract 5 here and say x equals negative 15. So these are your answers for this problem. So take a second and pause the computer and try your second problem. So what I did is I've already square rooted both sides because that's what cancels out that square. And when we add 2 to one side, you're going to get x is 13. Or when you add 2 to the second side, you're going to get x equals negative 9. So again, these are your answers. Now, not every time it's going to be very pretty like we had on the first video. So we need to find that C value that's going to make this a perfect square. Right now, 72 is not that value. So we need to get it to look like x squared plus bx plus this C value, and then it can equal any number we want for right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to group this. We're going to take our first 2 terms, that A and B term, and we're going to move it to one side, x squared plus 6x. If we have this value, we need to get it to the other side. So we're going to add 72 to both sides so we can find that C value that we found on the first video. Okay, so now we can go ahead and do what we did before. Our B value is 6, so our C value is going to be 6 divided by 2 squared, or 3 squared, or 9. So in order for this to be a perfect square binomial to look like we just solved in the first 2 problems, we're going to have this plus 9. But we know in algebra, what we do to one side, you have to do to the other. So I'm going to make this a different color to make it easier to see. So we just added 9 by completing the square. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. Now, this side here can be made into that perfect square binomial like we have been doing before. So we have our x plus 3 squared. Now it's equal to whatever these 2 add up to, which is 81. Now this problem looks just like we had in the problems before. So now we would solve. So we would have to square root both sides to get x plus 3 equals 9, or x plus 3 equals negative 9. When you subtract 3, you get 9 minus 3 is 6, or subtract 3 from the other side, x equals negative 9 minus 3 is negative 12. So we've only just now combined what we did on the first video with what we started with on here, and that's how we're finding our answers. So in example 2, we have this x squared minus 12x equals negative 20. So this first step that we had to do over here is now already completed. So I'm going to rewrite this and leave a little bit of space because I'm looking for that C value to complete my square. So we would say B is negative 12. So C has to be negative 12 divided by 2 squared, which is negative 6 squared, or a positive 36. So we're going to add 36 to both sides. When we do this, our perfect square trinomial is going to be x minus 6 squared equals negative 20 plus 36 is 16. So again, to solve this equation, we have to square root. So we would have two equations, x minus 6 equals 4, because the square root of 16 is 4, or x minus 6 equals negative 4. So if we add 6, we're going to get x is 10, or when we add 6 to this side, x is 2. And this would be our answer. So again, what I want you to do is pause your video for a second, try the first two, number 5 and 6, and then once you have those solved, we'll go over them, and then we'll do the All right, in problem number 5, we just left that space open here. When we solved for that C value to complete the square here on the left-hand side, what we would have is 16. So remember, what we do to one side by adding 16, we have to do to the other. So our answer would be our perfect square binomial, the quantity of x minus 4 squared equals 25. Now, in order to solve for x, we have to square root both sides and then go ahead and solve. Remember, 1 is equal to positive 5, 1 is equal to negative 5. When we add 4 to both sides, one of our answers is going to be 9, and the other is going to be negative 1. So these are our answers for number 5. In problem number 6, again, it's set up just nice, and we have to complete the square to get this value. So if b is 14, we would substitute that in for c, and c would give us 49. So what we do to one side, you have to do to the other. So we would have the quantity of x plus 7 squared equals 1, negative 48 plus 49. After we square root both sides and solve, we're going to get x is negative 6 or x is negative 8, and that would be our answer. So go ahead and look at, actually let's do number 7 and example 3 together. So for number 7, if you notice that we have x squared plus x on the left and a negative x on the right plus 3. So let's move our x's so they're together. So we would have x squared plus now 2x plus our c value equals 3. Okay, so if we have our like terms and they're on both sides, please put them together and just make that constant alone on the right-hand side. So if we said b is 2, our c value is going to be 2 divided by 2 squared, which is 1 squared, or just 1. So we would be adding 1 and then add 1 to the other side. So our perfect square binomial would be x plus 1 squared, right? We get that from right there, equals 4. Then we would square root, and we would get x plus 1 equals 2, or x plus 1 equals negative 2. To subtract 1, you get x equals 1, or subtracting 1 to the other side, you would get x equals negative 3. Now, originally I told you we're only going to be dealing with values when our x squared is 1. In this example here, we have a 2. So what we're allowed to do is divide everything by the number next to your x squared to get it to be 1. Now, think back to algebra. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So we have to divide our answer side as well. So we're going to get x squared minus 10x minus 171 equals 0. Now, we have to get this piece, this constant number, to the other side in order to complete the square. So we're going to have to add 171 to both sides. So we would have x squared minus 10x plus that c value equals 171. Now we can complete the square to solve. So our b value is negative 10, and our c value would be negative 10 divided by 2 squared, which gives us negative 5 squared, or 25. So we would add in 25 to one side and 25 to the other. So when we would simplify, we would have x minus 5 squared equals 196. And when we square root, we would have x minus 5 equals 14, or x minus 5 equals negative 14. We would add 5 to both sides and get x equals 19, or add 5 to both sides here and get x equals negative 9. That is completing the square. What I want you to do for homework is numbers 1 through 10 in your homework packet. I will be checking it in the morning or in the afternoon whenever I have you in class, and be ready for round 2.